Okay. So I have a question for you, and I'm curious to know your response to this. Perhaps you could let me know your response. Uh, what would you say is your biggest enemy? Your biggest enemy in life? What's your biggest enemy? While you're thinking about that, and then letting me know your response. Amazing. I'll suggest to you some of the things that some people might think are their biggest enemies. I think that some people might think that their biggest enemies are other people of various kinds, their spouse or their ex-spouse, their mother, their father, perhaps the government, the economy, uh, you know, depending on your political affiliation, it could be some particular other p political affiliation. But I'm seeing some responses coming in here, and so I'll read some of these, which I think are great. So we've got myself. So far consensus on that. We got my mind, which is similar. Somebody says things I'm not aware of. Somebody says no longer myself, thank God. Amazing. Um, Somebody says believing my own thoughts. Somebody says myself and not being able to overcome my obstacles to success. Somebody says mitochondrial dysfunction with a laugh out loud. Somebody says Satan, all capitals. I'm curious to that one. Can you define that for me, please? Just because I think different people might have different ideas about that. So I'd like to understand what is the specific definition that you're working with there. Somebody says, I'm sure it's me, but my ex comes in second. Yeah. Somebody says, my belief that the universe is hostile. Somebody says, myself. Uh, Somebody says, unwavering belief in myself. Great. So a lot of people there, yourself is your greatest enemy. And by the way, I'm curious for those who said myself and variations on that, would you define for me what does that mean? What is myself? As far as the definition of Satan, the person who said that says evil energy influencing people to harm each other and themselves. Okay. Uh, Somebody says, aha, can there be an enemy if there's only one consciousness? So for myself, people are defining that as my thoughts, my beliefs. I'm not going to say that one. That's a very good one, but we'll get back to that one in a moment. My beliefs, my thoughts, not feeling enough. Great. Okay. So, um, interesting. So now what thoughts in particular? What thoughts in particular? I mean, for those who say your thoughts or your beliefs, what thoughts would you say in particular are uh are the ones that are your enemy? And somebody says, well, not my true self, but getting trapped in states and thinking that keeps me trapped and not getting out of it. Okay, so the thought that I'm a limited being. Okay, great. Well, this is a very advanced group. Some of you have really you've gotten way ahead of where I was going to go with this. So, so let me rein it in for a moment. We'll take a slight detour, uh, in the way that I was thinking that we might go with this, and then we'll come back to where some of you have gone with this, which I think is excellent. So my thought is that if you think about it, you might consider that perhaps uh, you might say that fear is your biggest enemy. And we could even frame some of the things, you said your thoughts, your beliefs, yourself. I mean, when you say that it's the thoughts and beliefs that are fear-based that seem to be the problematic ones, the ones that are your enemy. I mean, because you probably wouldn't say that you're doing battle with the thoughts that say, I'm okay, you're okay, everything's okay, my life is okay, everything's going fine, everything's going to work out. Those are probably not the kinds of thoughts that you would say are your enemy, but it's rather the thoughts that say, like, it's not okay. Things are going badly. Things are going to continue to go badly. Things are going to get even worse. Even if things seem to be going well now, just you wait and see what happens because they're going to somehow become very disastrous. at some point, probably in the near future. Uh, so and you could agree with me or disagree with me, but I'm proposing probably that many people might be able to see that it's fear actually that seems to be the enemy. And this fear can show up in all kinds of different ways, right? I mean, you could have fear of hostile agents, hostile entities, like whoever those might be, whether it's your ex-wife or it's your, hostile government or hostile whatever. It's this sense of hostility that you need to be afraid of. It could also show up as fear of uh, like disasters or accidents or things that are not necessarily specifically somebody's fault, but unwanted things that might happen that you might be afraid of. And then the consequences of this could be all kinds of things, right? I mean, you could, as a result of those things, your behaviors could be curtailed and limited. You might have desires, but you don't pursue those desires, or at least you don't go all in on them because of those fears, because of what other people might think, how other people might judge, how other people might feel. You want to try and manage all of that proactively by not stepping out of line, by not doing anything that might disappoint others, that might not, you don't want to do anything that might be hurtful or that might get a hurtful reaction or response toward you. You might therefore avoid, well, pretty much anything and everything, right? I mean, uh, you could avoid pursuing passions. You could avoid pursuing careers. You could avoid pursuing opportunities, both professionally and personally. You could avoid friendships. You could avoid all kinds of relationships. You could avoid situations. You could avoid so many possible things, all out of fear. Uh, is this making sense? Would any of you agree with any of that? Does that ring a bell, or am I totally off base in terms of your experience? You could let me know one way or the other. Got a yes. Many of you are asleep. Absolutely. Okay, great. We got a thumbs up. So some people are in agreement. Some people are asleep. Some people are afraid. Ha! You're afraid to even respond and let me know. Maybe because you're afraid that I'm trying to trap you or something, or you don't want to hurt my feelings. Let me know that you think I'm totally wrong. Um, which would be which would be amazing if that was the case, but it's probably not the case. Uh, so I'm thinking that that's one way that we could look at it. And I think that that would be, in a sense, more productive than looking at it through the lens of the things that I suggested at the beginning. Just as a reminder, I suggested that many people, not you, because uh, you're a very advanced bunch of people. You've done the work, the introspection, uh, the analysis, all these kinds of things in order to determine clearly for yourself that none of those things, apart from the ex-wife, I get that, still seems to be very much a problem. But apart from that, you have determined that all of the rest of it couldn't really be your enemy. Not really, even though sometimes it seems like it. So maybe I've kind of done a decent job of bringing these things together. I'm proposing maybe it's fear, and maybe that fear shows up as your thoughts and your beliefs. Because you probably would easily dismiss any thoughts or beliefs that didn't provoke fear. I mean, if you had a thought like, uh, you know, there's a alien race of beings who just love Gorgonzola, and they're coming to Earth to invade Earth to steal all the Gorgonzola. You're probably not going to worry about that one too much. because it's a little bit weird. You don't really you don't have buy-in on that. But the ones that seem the ones that get a reaction, the ones that provoke that fear, those seem to be problematic, and you have a hard time letting them go. And so therefore they seem to be the enemy. Seems to be because of the fear. That's my proposal. I'm sure there is a Twin Peaks reference there, but I don't know what it is. Did Twin Peaks have a race of aliens who love Gorgonzola? Was that it? I wouldn't be surprised. Um, so then the problem is this. What do we do with that? What do we do with that? Anybody have a thought on what you would do with that? Either the way that I framed it or any other way that you framed it. Like, what do you do with that enemy? So somebody says, look within. Okay, great. Think about it constantly. I like that answer because that's really honest, isn't it? That's what we do. We think about it constantly, as if thinking about it was somehow going to be the solution rather than the problem itself. Anybody else? Anybody else have any thoughts about what we could do about it? Face it, go into the fear. Great. Uh, identify what's causing it, breathing and find the feeling. Okay, great. The other one, I don't even know what that, I don't know what that, it looks like a blue tongue. You're going to have a blue tongue. It seems like an interesting strategy. Uh, release the charge. Great. Dissolve it. Yeah. So how would you go about for those of you who said release the charge, dissolve it, uh, identify what the cause is, face it, go into the fear, look within. What wh how would you go about that in a way that would give you the resolution that you want? You know, you've got this enemy, presumably you want to be free of having that enemy. So how would you approach things and follow that through in order to get that result? Because that's what really matters, right? So somebody says, find its location in the body. Great, interesting. Somebody says, does resistance give meaning to the experience? Yeah, might. What's your thought on that? Somebody says, go into the feeling of it. Okay. See where I'm feeling the seeming outward oppression. Okay. Active relaxation. Great. Distracting. The ask protocol. What is there before the next thought? Great. Sounds like some of the things, maybe some of the things that I've shared in the past, you've worked with and gotten some benefits from. So that sounds great. Let it roar. Just allow everything. Great. Um, so to the degree that those strategies work, you what would you say is the underlying essence of the resolution in every one of those cases? Any thoughts on that? Somebody says peace, releasing, belief, letting God do his thing, letting go, that there's nothing to fix, accepting. Great. Trust. Okay, great. So now here's I'm going to propose something to you. I propose that, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with any of you. I'm gonna give my own take on this. I propose that the ultimate real underlying resolution comes from a recognition of who you are. And that recognition is the antidote to what the actual enemy is. And my proposal is that what the actual enemy is, even deeper than the fear. The fear is an intermediate. Even deeper than that, the actual enemy is ignorance. So let me explain this. Somebody says, "Yeah, but who am I?" Well, that's for you to have clarity about. I mean, I can give you the answer, but that answer is only is uh, useful to you when you connect that to the knowing or recognition within yourself. Otherwise, it's just more thoughts. So I'll propose. So let me expand on this a little bit. So imagine that you lie in bed at night, you close your eyes, and the next thing you know, you're dreaming. Now, an interesting thing about dreams, you've probably noticed this, is that typically when you're dreaming, you don't know you're dreaming. You don't have a uh, you don't have a thought usually during the dream that says, "This is a dream. I'm dreaming. This character that I'm imagining myself to be is not who I really am, and who I really am is something else. And therefore, whatever's happening in this dream is not happening to me. It's happening in my consciousness. It's the nature of the dream. You usually don't have that thought or that awareness. So the dream is occurring in, we'll say, your consciousness. Hopefully, you would agree with that. And the interesting thing about it is, as I said, that you don't realize that that's happening. So instead, what happens is that you identify as a character in the dream. You say, I am this right here. I am this thing. I am this character who is navigating this reality. And all of these experiences are my experiences. And the things that are happening to me. And so, therefore, whatever seems to be a threat is a threat to me. And I need to be worried about that. And so if you have a dream in which there seem to be lots of threats, then your experience will be that one of fear, right? I mean, have you ever had a dream where you were afraid? Of course you have, right? I mean, we've all had dreams where we were afraid. Oftentimes we call those nightmares. So if you have a dream in which things seem to be threatening and you're feeling afraid and you don't realize that it's a dream, then your experience is that you are being threatened and you are afraid. And it all just seems like that's how it is, and there's no other way around it. And the only thing that you can do is try and deal with the circumstances that you believe are producing the fear. So within the dream, let's say there's a tornado, and the tornado is heading right for you, and you're feeling afraid. And in the dream, if you don't realize that it's a dream and you think that you're that character that is about to be harmed by the tornado, then you feel afraid and you try to deal with that on the terms of the dream. You're trying to avoid the tornado. You try and outrun the tornado, or you try to get into some kind of underground bunker or something. You try and deal with the circumstances that you think are causing the fear. So the fear seems to be in that context. It seems to be uh, it seems to be conditionally caused by what you believe is threatening you, i.e., the tornado. You think that the tornado is causing the fear. It seems like if the tornado was not there, then you would not be afraid. And within, within certain parameters, that's relatively true, right? But the mistake is fundamental. It's much more fundamental than the tornado. It's that you actually are misunderstanding what's actually happening. You think that you're a character that is about to be harmed by a tornado, when in fact you are the one who's dreaming. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but nothing within the dream can ever harm you because the dream is happening in your consciousness. So you could dream of all kinds of things. You could dream of extreme poverty and starvation and war and natural disaster and all kinds of things. But none of that actually harms you because you're not subject to those things because you're the one who's dreaming. So notice that now if we translate that over into your waking experience, you have all of these things which happen, and you think that some of those things are the cause of the fear. You know, the cause of the fear is I don't know where the money's going to come from. The cause of the fear is this person might not love me anymore. The cause of the fear is I might be laughed at. I might be rejected. Whatever it is, the cause of fear is something bad could happen to this body. That's what we think. And within the context, within that frame, if as long as you assume that you are this character, then it's relatively true. It's relatively true because if it's true that you are this character, then things that harm the character harm you if you are the character. Does that make sense? Right? I mean, if you are the character, things that harm the character harm you. There's It's a mathematical thing. If A equals B, uh, then anything that you do to, well, if A is B, if A is B, and you do something to B, then that transformation also occurs to A because they're they're not just equivalent, they are the same if they are the same. So we are believing that we are this character and that there are things that are going to happen or are happening to this character, and that gives rise to the fear. So there are lots of strategies that people have for dealing with that, right? I mean, and I'm not necessarily saying that they're all wrong or that they are wrong at all, but it's useful just to recognize them for what they are, and then we have options available. So a lot of the time, most people they're trying to uh, change the conditions, right? If they think, well, they don't have enough money, they don't know where the money's going to come from, and they think that that's the threat. So they want to change that condition by getting money or knowing where the money's going to come from. So they're doing things at that level, which may or may not work. I mean, I'm not denying that it could work. It's just a matter of it's a relatively low leverage strategy. So I'm not suggesting that you should never do those things. I'm just pointing out that relative to other types of strategies, it's a relatively low leverage strategy. So it's not the most efficient use of your energy. If you don't have anything else available to you, then it's all you got. So you work with that. But the bigger problem with that is that it doesn't actually address the real problem. It's addressing the uh it's attempting to mitigate that by changing the conditions so that the conditions which you believe are producing the fear are changed. So it's indirect. So that's the level at which most people, I think, are mostly operating. And again, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not suggesting that you should never do that. I'm just pointing out that it is a relatively low leverage approach. So then we could work at a different level and notice that the actual problem as we seem to experience it is the fear. So the uh so there's the the at the level of I don't know where the money's coming from. There's the circumstances, the conditions, but then there's also what I'm actually experiencing, which I perceive is the problem, which is the fear. So I could instead operate at that level and then just notice, okay, how do I know about this fear? What is it that lets me know about this fear? What does the fear actually consist of? And then if we examine that, we start to notice, well, this fear seems to consist of uh, sensations, and the sensations seem to be uh, connected to things that I'm thinking and imagining. So if I imagine I'm going to be homeless and toothless under the bridge, and then I have the thought, oh no, that's terrible, that's unbearable. Then that tends to increase the sensations, which I call fear. So we could work at that level, which is much more direct, although not the most direct, but it's much more direct than working at the level of the conditions and circumstances. Also, by the way, I'm not suggesting that these are not mutually exclusive things. You can work at multiple levels. So I'm not suggesting that you should not take any actions at the level of the conditions and circumstances, or that doing so would necessarily be in conflict with working at the level of noticing the actual experience. So by working at that level, by shifting the attention to noticing what is the actual nature of this experience that I'm calling fear, what is the process, what is the internal process that I use in order to produce this, that can give, that's a much higher leverage approach because it's, you don't usually have direct control over the conditions and circumstances. There's too many variables and factors. But you do have fairly direct control over your own actual experience and internal process. So if you shift to noticing, okay, here's what I'm doing internally, here's what the experience actually is. Instead of being at the level of just the unconscious narrative playing out, you can actually notice, okay, here's what I'm doing, here's what the actual experience is, aside from the meaning that I've assigned to it, the meaning of fear and danger. What's actually happening is sensation, and then there's a story about that. And the process that I use to produce that is a process that I can be aware of. And through being aware of it, I can begin to more directly shift that. So uh, that's a higher leverage approach. Now, even higher leverage than that is to notice that all of these, all of the problem always hinges upon the assumption that you are something that can be harmed or destroyed. So, can you, does that make sense? Can you think of any exception to that? So every problem starts with an assumption that you are something that can be harmed or destroyed. If there was no way that you could be harmed or destroyed, there would be no problem, no fear. It's like if you can watch a movie, and if you watch the movie, then all kinds of things can happen in the movie. But as long as you don't have, as long as you're not identified with the movie or characters in the movie, then you're fine. And of course, sometimes you might catch yourself getting identified, right? You start to get scared, or you start to get scared. Uh, but as soon as you recognize, it's a movie, then there's no longer a problem. So that's why I'm proposing that the real foundation of problems, the real enemy, as it were, is ignorance. Fear is a an intermediary. Fear is uh, a a result of the ignorance. So fear is dependent upon ignorance. If there's no ignorance, there's no fear. So working at the level of uh, recognizing who you are is even higher leverage. So I'm proposing these three levels that we have access to. So one is at the level of the conditions and circumstances. The other one is at the level of the subjective experience. And the third is at the level of recognizing who you are. So again, I'm not saying that they're mutually exclusive. Uh, I mean, you could make the argument that uh, they are, but I'm not making that argument. So I'm not denying that the argument exists that they are mutually exclusive, but I'm not I don't think that that's necessary to go there for this for the purposes of this. I think that you can kind of uh straddle these different uh areas in a reasonably skillful way. So I'll use the analogy again of the dream to clarify what I mean by this. So if you're dreaming, one possibility is that you could recognize that uh, that you're dreaming. It's just a dream. You have no interest in it. Doesn't matter to you at all. It's completely not interesting. So you completely disengage from it. At which point the probably you wake up. The dream probably ends, I would think. So that's one possibility. But another possibility is that you could realize that you're dreaming and you could continue to dream, but in a lucid way. So in that case, you can still be you can still have a level of engagement with the dream, but you're uh, not identified as a character in the dream. So it gives you a level of freedom that you didn't know you had when you were identified with a character in the dream. So I'm suggesting that it's not necessarily that if you don't have to necessarily wake up and end the dream. You could also wake up and continue to dream in a lucid way. And so I'm proposing that the same is applicable at the waking level, which is that it's possible to recognize who you are, therefore undoing the ignorance, but continuing to have engagement at the level of the uh, subjective experience. So you could still continue to play with that, not necessarily just completely cutting yourself off from it and just, declaring I'm impervious to any of this. It does not interest me. So we have these three different levels that we can operate from. Maybe there are others as well. I'm not necessarily suggesting, I'm not meaning to suggest that these are the only three levels. I'm pointing out that these three levels exist. So again, that's at the level of conditions and circumstances. So, if you say, well, you don't know where the money's going to come from, that the level of conditions and circumstances, you could start applying for jobs. You could start, making calls to people and, proposing, making offers to them, saying, hey, I've got this skill, I've got this knowledge. I'd be willing to trade that for, $50 million or whatever. You can do that. You can work at that level. Second level is at the level of your subjective experience and noticing that and making changes to that through awareness and observation and intention. So that would be, again, noticing what is the actual experience apart from the story that I tell about it. How am I aware of this experience? What is the actual nature of it? Noticing that it consists of sensations, mental images, thoughts, and so forth. And then also being aware of the internal process that you use in order to produce and sustain that experience. And through that, you have more options available to you because that just naturally allows you to start to intervene and make changes to that at a direct level or relatively direct level. And then the third way is at the level of recognizing who you are, independent of the identity that you've believed yourself to be. So I've shared a lot of different processes for exploring at the level of your subjective experience. So I've shared the um, I've shared the ask framework, which consists of, in part, it also parts of that are the breath awareness and or um, active relaxation. So active relaxation, if you're not familiar with that, I have I have several videos on that topic on YouTube. The one where I go into significant detail and I have a guided practice is called, I think it's called Do Less and Manifest More or something like that. And so I'm not going to go into detail on that today because I've talked about those things quite a lot in the past. I've also given the SLIPS method, which I also have a video on YouTube about, which talks about how to become aware of the internal process that you use, and through that awareness to start to allow for changes to take place. So those are all at working at that middle tier of noticing your subjective experience and making changes there. What I'd like to just briefly explore now is, and then I see there's things in the chat, and I'll respond to questions in the chat and everything else following this. But what I want to briefly explore now is how to be aware of yourself as you are, independent of the uh, identification with the character. So the thing to understand about this is that this is not about a thought. This is not about a belief, because the thoughts and the beliefs are actually within the dream, so to speak. So part of the they're part of the content. But if you understand the parallel, the analogy that I've used of the dream, then this hopefully will start to make sense. Because notice that I've said when you're dreaming, then you might mistake yourself to be a character in the dream, but obviously that's not true. And you find that out at least when you wake up from the dream, because then you realize, it was a dream. Whatever I thought was happening to me was actually happening to the character, but I'm not that character. You might not actually cognize it in that way consciously, but that's the essence of what you realize on some level. So the same applies here. So you and the reason that I'm mentioning this right now is to notice that if you're having a dream, then whatever happens in that dream, any thoughts that happen in that dream, any feelings, any sensations, any events, anything whatsoever that happens in that dream is part of the content of the dream. And all of that is happening in your consciousness. So it's all a an expression of that consciousness. It depends upon consciousness, but consciousness does not depend upon those things. So none of the content actually can affect or alter the consciousness in which it is occurring because that's the nature of the relationship between the two. The consciousness is independent and all of the content is dependent upon consciousness. So it's a uh, there's a dependent relationship that goes one way. So consciousness is independent. So no thought in the dream is able to cannot actually be the reality of who you are because it's content in within who you are. So the same applies here. So no thought that you can have is going to be, and no sensation and no experience that you can have is actually the truth of who you are, independent of the waking dream that's occurring. And this is the big mistake that most people make is that they're trying to, no, let me take a step back. Most people never even, it never even occurs to them that they might be something other than the character that they have taken themselves to be. So there's that. But for the few people who where that arises, that question, that curiosity, that perception, that awareness, that maybe I'm not what I've identified as. For those few people, the mistake that most of them continue to make is that they keep looking for the answer to the question, who am I, in thought. Because the habit is to keep looking to thought. So they make the mistake. They say, well, this is how I've always done it. This is how I look for answers. This is how I get answers is in thought. Therefore, this answer must exist in thought. And so they continue to look in vain because they're never going to get the answer in that way. Because the answer is beyond thought, because the thought is the content within consciousness. Who you are is consciousness. So cannot be captured by itself because it can't get outside of itself in order to capture itself. So a thought is always an encapsulation. A thought is always something discrete. So you can't, but consciousness defies that. There is no way to get hold of it because consciousness is not a thing. It's not subject to those kinds of conditions. You can't get a hold of it. You cannot bind it in any way because it's beyond all of that. It's beyond space and time. Space and time are constructs. And if that seems too abstract or confusing, again, use the analogy of the dream. Notice that within a dream, there's an entire uh, uh, dream universe that exists. So you could dream that you're going to Toledo, Ohio, in and in but that's within the dream. That that reality exists within the dream. That space exists within the dream. And in the dream, there's a time, there's a duration that takes place. That could be seconds or minutes or hours or days or weeks or months or years or whatever. That's all a construct within the dream. So time and space exist within the dream. The dream does not exist within time and space. Time and space exist within the dream. They're relative to the dream. This is why you can have dreams within dreams within dreams within dreams, and they each have their own time and space because the time and space is relative to the dream. So if this waking experience is also a dream, then the time and space within this are are aspects of or their features of the dream. They exist within the dream, not outside. So you can't capture who you are because who you are is consciousness, which does not have those kinds of boundaries. So if you're looking still to thought in order to give you that answer, you'll look in vain. So that's a big clue. You can just stop looking to thought. Anytime you have a thought, you can just know that's not it. Might be a very nice thought. Might result in nice feelings, but that's not it. It's just not it. So if you're wanting, and by the way, I'm not proposing that anybody should uh do this inquiry. So i- please know yourself and feel free to operate at whatever level you want to operate at. I do advocate for as much as possible having working with more leverage rather than less leverage, just because if the less leverage you have, the less likely your success is. It's just an energy expenditure matter. That it's like if you think about it, a teeter-totter or a seesaw, the children's playground equipment used to be at least standard equipment. It's probably too much liability these days, but um, if you know what I'm talking about, then if you've ever played with those at, at any point in your life, then you probably know that depending on how you move the teeter-totter or the seesaw on the fulcrum that it rests on, then you have more or less leverage. And that's why an adult and a small child can play on the teeter-totter and teeter-totter because they can adjust who has more leverage. So if the small child has far more leverage than the adult, then the small child, in theory, with enough leverage, can keep the adult up in the air. So having leverage allows you to achieve more with less input. The other way around, of course, is that, imagine the small child who has the leverage and the adult who doesn't have the leverage, so the adult is kept up in the air. There's nothing the adult can do about that because as long as they don't have enough leverage, no matter what they do, no matter how much energy they put into it, they can't get the result. So leverage matters. And that's why I suggest working where you have the most leverage because most people squander their energy where they have very little leverage and therefore they don't get the results. They feel frustrated, they get discouraged, and they don't gain any knowledge from that because they're so fixated on trying to achieve something where they don't have the leverage. They just exhaust themselves and they don't learn anything. So, at least get yourself to a point where you have enough leverage that you can start to learn because learning is also a way to give yourself more leverage. The more you learn, the more leverage you get. So more leverage is better, in my view. You can feel free to disagree. Uh, that's totally fine. But my opinion is more leverage is better, gives better results. So I do recommend, and of course you're welcome to do whatever you want, but I recommend at the very least shift if you're focused primarily at the level of conditions and circumstances, shift your focus to where you have more leverage, which would be at the level of noticing your actual experience, because that matters a great deal. If the way in which you're going about things uh, is huge. So most people overlook this to and they get negative there are negative consequences of overlooking it because they're uh, trying to deal with life in a way where they feel they're tense, frustrated. So they're already squandering their energy, angry, all of these ways they're already fighting with themselves unconsciously. It's like you know, they're trying to think of a good analogy. It's like they're trying to they're trying it's like trying to push on something with their left hand and at with their right hand at the same time. And they can push harder with each hand, but it's not going to give them any better results because they're working against themselves. And so this is the state that most people find themselves in unconsciously with the tension, with the frustration, with the anger, the fear. They're working against themselves. So they're trying to make progress, but they're exhausting themselves trying to make that progress because of their own unconscious habits. So bringing awareness to that, noticing, what does this actual, what does the experience actually consist of? Notice what are the sensations? Where are they located? What are the qualities of the sensations? And importantly, to notice that all of that is independent of the narrative. So it's not, I use these words, we use these words to describe it, call it fear or anxiety or frustration or anger, disappointment, discouragement, whatever. But it's the actual experience is independent and prior to the narrative. So if you start to really notice that, that makes a huge difference because then you can start to notice, well, what's actually happening are these sensations, this tension, uh, and that doesn't actually really have a name. So you don't need to name it. You can just stay with noticing what it actually consists of. Just that much starts to transform things. And then, as I said, if you also then notice what is the inner process that you use in order to generate or sustain that, what what do you imagine? What are you thinking? What meaning are you giving to it? So there's an inner process by which you create and then sustain the subjective experience. So the more awareness you bring to that, the more that you can start to release and shift that. And again, using some of the tools that I've shared, like active relaxation, for example, can be really supportive for that. So it doesn't have to be an analytical process. There can be some analytical quality aspect to it. I mean, you could apply your rational mind to this analysis, but it has to it has to at some point to some degree um, also it start to just notice through awareness rather than thinking about it. So active relaxation helps to facilitate that. It's not the only method, but it is a useful method. So if you were to only do that, that would give you much more leverage in your life, and that would be really nice. And uh, it's impossible. It's actually impossible to completely uh, eliminate the enemy, as it were, uh, with only that. Because again, the foundation of the problem is ignorance. And that's not something that you can remedy solely working at that level, but instead it necessitates that you begin to inquire. And again, this is I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to do this, at least not right now. It's one of those things where it's like, I think in, the Course of Miracles says it's like an optional course. No, it's it's a required course. It's optional when you do it, something like that. So this is kind of like that. I mean, it's inevitable at some point that you're gonna have to, I think, uh, do this inquiry, but you don't necessarily need to do it now. And I'm not suggesting that trying to do it now will necessarily be better than doing it later. It could be, but it really depends on you. So if it doesn't appeal to you, or if it doesn't seem, if it's just not interesting to you, then don't do it yet. But if it does make, if there's something about it that's interesting or intriguing to you, then it's probably worth exploring. So to start to actually ask yourself, well, what, who am I really? I mean, even logically, if you think about what's if you are this body, then uh, I'm reminded of Ecclesiastes, uh, which scholars debate who is the author. But ostensibly, I mean, it claims to be Solomon, King Solomon, the uh, son of David, and he says meaningless, meaningless. It's all meaningless. And it's like it's just lamenting. It's all meaningless. I've done it all. I've had it all, and it's all meaningless. It's for nothing. I have all the wealth and all of the power and all of the wisdom and all of the pleasure, and it's all meaningless because you can't hold on to it. It's all going to slip through your fingers. So you could start to look in that way and notice, if I am this body, what am I doing? You start to see it become it's just pretty much like putting out fires. A lot of this, just putting out fires. Oh, I feel uncomfortable. There's a fire. What do I do? Well, if I had more money, I'd feel a little more comfortable. Okay, great. Put out the fire. Oh, I'm feeling uncomfortable. Well, why does that seem to be? Well, because I'm not sure this person loves me. Okay, how do I solve that problem? Putting out the fire. Oh, I seem to be uncomfortable. Well, what's causing that? Well, I have, this uncertainty about my health, this pain, these symptoms, whatever. Okay, I'll try and fix that. So it's just putting out fires. Totally fine. I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just pointing out that at a certain point, sooner or later, this inquiry is going to come up, whether it's now or it's later, right? I mean, like the Ecclesiastes is ostensibly it's when Solomon is an old man. So, he's gone through he had his heyday. He did all the things. Uh, but then he becomes an old man and he starts to reflect. He's like, okay, what am I doing? Where is this going? To what end was all this? And he says, it's like everybody, the wise and the ignorant, the righteous and the wicked, they all end up in the same place. This place of a reckoning. Like, what is this all about? Where am I going? Where is this headed? So at some point, this inquiry has to come up. And and when you start to examine this, then you could start to look at what is the fundamental assumption that I've been making all along. I've been assuming that all of this is about me, and who specifically have I been imagining that I am? And if you really look, you'll see that all of the thoughts, all of the actions, all of the fears, they all refer back to some finite entity, a character. And if you really explore that, it's like, what even is that? Because that's anything that you could put your finger on and say this is it. Well, that's changing. The body is changing. The mind is changing. The emotions are changing. It's all changing. So even the story is changing. So who is it that you're really talking about? And if you really start to examine it, you'll start to notice, well, I guess it just seems that there's just this sense of being someone. That actually is the real thing that you've identified with, just the sense of being someone. Because when you say I, you're not actually referring to any concrete, specific, physical entity, because as I said, that's always changing. You can't be referring to some specific concrete, uh, mental entity, because that's also always changing. It can't be a specific emotional entity, because that's always changing. So it's really just this sense of being something, being someone. That's all along been what you've been referring to. And how do you know about that? I mean, because you're aware of that. You're aware of the sense of being someone. How do you know about that? So you're aware of it, right? So it's through awareness. Well, if you are aware, can you be what it is that you're aware of? If you're aware of the sense of being someone, could you be defined by that sense of being someone? Like, if the sense of being someone was to momentarily wink out of existence, even if it comes, let's say it comes back, but just for a split second, it's not there. Do you not exist or do you still exist? And if you actually notice your experience, you'll notice that probably you'll notice that that sense of being someone actually is coming and going all the time. It's not a constant. It's just that the habit is to identify as that and to imagine that you're not there when it's not there. But actually, if you really look carefully, you can start to notice that you're always here, even when the sense of being someone or something is not here. This is why I said you're not going to be able to capture this with thought. The answer does not exist in thought. You're not going to get to it that way. So if this, if you know, your mind starts to melt because you're like, wait a second, how do I get hold of this thing? You can't. You can just acknowledge what your actual experience is and then be willing to continue to allow that inquiry to guide you to the direct realization, which can't be captured. But it clearly is always here. Clearly. And if that makes no sense to you, that's okay. Like I said, it's not for everybody right now. It's totally fine. So that's what I wanted to say. And holy cow, 51. So I'm going to respond to things here and see what I can get through. Uh, so somebody says control. Okay, somebody says, when do you think that rise in of fear, anger started? Right now. Take a look and see. Everything that's happening is happening right now. The story of a past is happening right now. It could never happen any other moment. It's always right now. So, within the story, we could argue forever about when, but the when, whatever point we place that when at within the narrative itself is always happening right now. So now is always the correct answer. All right. Somebody says, explain recognizing who I am. I hope I did that. If I didn't, you can let me know. Somebody says, should you allow bad thoughts? Well, I don't know. I can't tell you what you should do. Uh, what I can propose is that trying to stop thought it doesn't seem to work very well. Your mileage might vary on that, but if you find that you're unable to stop thought in a way that works well for you, then I wouldn't recommend that you try and stop bad thoughts. Notice that bad thoughts, we're really just talking about thoughts, and then there's another thought that says it's a bad thought. So there's a thought, and then there's another thought about the thought that says it's a bad thought. And that's all it is, if you notice. There's probably a feeling too. The feeling is probably the reason why. So there's a thought, and it's associated with a feeling, and then there's a thought that says I don't like that feeling. That feeling is a bad feeling, and therefore it's a bad thought. But that's it. So I have found that it personally, I find that it works far better just to allow uh, all of it. Uh, Somebody says, "What if it feels like a nightmare?" Well, uh, so so imagine that you lie down in bed, you close your eyes, and you begin to dream, and the dream feels like a nightmare. Uh, what do you do? What would be your recommendation for yourself in that situation? My thought about it would be that recognizing it for what it is would probably be the most useful thing. Somebody says, explain the highest point. I don't know what that means. So you'll have to clarify what that means if you want me to comment on it. Somebody says, the hurting experience is not a thought. I don't agree totally. Do you mean we shouldn't be scared to be hurt, even if it is possible? Uh, well, so what I intended was to point out that there's that the problem as you experience it of the hurt is a feeling and and a thought about the feeling. So there's a feeling, and you don't actually know what the feeling means. There's no way to know what the feeling means. You can't possibly know what the feeling means, but you can have a thought about it, and the thought can tell you what the feeling means. It doesn't, it's not actually what the feeling means, but it's the thought that you have about what it means. So there's a feeling, and then there's a thought that says this is pain or this hurts. Uh, but how did that come about? And it came about because there was some inner process. So even so-called physical pain is a output of the nervous system. So it is not an input. Nothing hurts you. You hurt as an action, as an output in response to the information and your analysis or your evaluation of that information. So, uh, you fall and uh, and there's signals coming in from whatever points in the body, and all of that combined, maybe your nervous system decides pain would be an appropriate response, so it produces pain. And this is true of physical pain, emotional pain, whatever. So it's an output. So no conditions are actually capable of causing pain. Conditions can be factors, can provide information that your nervous system can use in order to produce pain. So, uh, so, uh, should you be scared to be hurt? I mean, so sometimes the this being scared to be hurt is a useful learning. So a classic example would be you touch a hot stove, you get burned, it hurts, you hurt, and so then your nervous system associates hot stove, high risk of getting hurt, don't touch the stove. So you're scared, therefore, of touching the hot stove. Now, that's probably useful learning. So probably not a problem. So so sometimes being scared of being hurt is actually useful when it's appropriate. I mean, if uh there are lots and lots and lots of things that hopefully most of us have learned just for our own self-care, that they carry with them a high risk of getting hurt, and therefore we're like, yeah, not going to do that. That's not necessarily a problem. So that's just skillful. But if there's something that you want, there's something that you desire, and let's say you have a desire to speak with other people, but you have a fear of speaking with other people because the fear is, well, I might get hurt. There's, of course, that fear might have come, almost certainly came from an earlier time in your life when that was the best that you could do. That was the best evaluation you could make. It might even have been spot on at a certain time in your life. There might have been certain circumstances. For many people, it was within their family. They were very young. They were relatively powerless. Or it might have been at school, whatever. They were bullied. There were situations in which taking certain social risks did actually result in hurt, maybe even physical hurt, maybe even getting hit. So it might have been an intelligent learning strategy to have associated taking social risks with getting hurt. However, uh, things have changed, I hope. And so then you get to choose whether or not you want to keep that conditioning. And so it's just a matter of if there's something that you want, and when you really look at the situation now, you're like, well, I'm not actually going to get hurt. Uh, my habit, my conditioning is that I would hurt myself in certain ways, emotionally or otherwise. Um, but that's something that I can change through awareness, becoming aware of the internal process through that awareness, allowing for things to change. So I would just say it's a matter of what you want. So getting clear on what you want and then making intelligent choices to allow for the conditioning to change, old patterns to be released, which are actually not serving you any longer, even though they might have served you at some earlier point in some way or another. But when you can reasonably confidently recognize that given the current conditions, the old conditioning doesn't actually apply, then it's just up to you to make the choice to release that old conditioning. And uh, I obviously I give a lot of different tools and processes for being able to do that, and you can pick and choose the ones that seem to give you good results and apply those in order to get those changes. Um, okay, so explain recognizing who I am independent of identity. I think I did that. If I didn't, and you still have a question about that, you can let me know. Somebody says, I always allow the feeling when I experience resistance or something I don't like, but sometimes I get bad thoughts. If I get thoughts pop into my mind and I keep thinking them, is that a bad thing? Is that reinforcing it, or it doesn't matter? Well, why would you keep thinking them? And I would propose that the reason you would keep thinking them is because you haven't resolved yet the charge attached to them. So the charge is that I mean, fundamentally it's based on fear. So you fear that that thought is somehow uh, helping to warn you about a danger and that you need to continue to review that because you haven't yet figured that out and you're still feeling afraid. So, uh, so if that happens, then I would say apply uh, awareness to the internal, first of all, to what's the actual experience. So there's the thought, but the thought is the reason why that thought continues to repeat is because there's a feeling, the emotional charge that's attached to that. So become aware of the actual direct experience of that prior to the thought about it. Just notice, what does it actually consist of? Where there are sensations, where are those sensations located? What are the qualities of the sensations, independent of the story about it? And then also notice, what is the internal process that you use in order to create or maintain those feelings. So there's a story that you're telling yourself, there are mental images that you're imagining, uh, and you want to become aware of that because that's how you're producing that for yourself. Let's see. Somebody says, "Who am I really? I seem to be an energy field in imagery. There is an image of a body. If eyes are open, or there is light, but otherwise there is a diffusion into an energy field. But I live as a body and fear pain and likely death, and am somewhat preoccupied with symptoms as the body ages. Yeah. And why is this exploration scary for me? Well, I would say it's scary for. I mean, the reason why it would be scary would be because my proposal again is that it comes back to ignorance of who you are. So if you uh, if you were having a dream in which you believe that you were a character in the dream and the character's body was aging and there were symptoms, then you might have fear because you're identified with that, which seems to be unstable, possibly falling apart, maybe coming to an end. So, but upon recognizing that you are the one who's dreaming and that you are transcendent of the character within the dream, then frees you from the fears that are tied to the character. That would be one way to look at it. Somebody says, I still can't fully conceptualize how this is useful. Um, well, if you have a specific question, I'd be happy to respond to that. Somebody says, this is the best, most helpful thing I've ever heard from you. Great. Uh, Great. Amazing. Like, right. So, you know, not sure, one person's not sure how it's useful, and the other one says it's the most helpful thing. So it's wonderful. Somebody says, what does it feel like when you start to remove those painful internal processes? Do you have any anecdotes as to how it feels when things are progressing and what changes you noticed? Uh, well, I mean, anything is possible. So I would say sometimes it's just um, just lightness and ease and freedom and peace and clarity. And then other times there can be, uh, you know, uh, doubt and fear and uncertainty and discomfort and all kinds of things. So it can go any which way. Um, because the thing is, if you're fundamentally, I'm this is about releasing the releasing habits of perception or subtle behavior. And and there's meaning that's involved in that. There's always meaning. And as I propose, the fundamental meaning is the meaning that all of this is about me. All of this pertains to me, and I'm something that can be harmed or destroyed. So as the habits are released, then first of all, that's a change. And secondly, it's a specific kind of change to a more unknown or open state. And depending on a lot of factors, in any given moment, you might perceive that in a lot of different ways, some very delightful and some as threatening. So sorry, I can't give you anything, any like hard and fast rules for that. Somebody says the bad feeling creates the bad thought. It's not the other way around. Well, could it's circular. I mean, so thoughts and feelings are associated and they can go round and round and round and round and just amp up. Uh, it's sort of chicken and egg kind of thing. Which comes first? Kind of, kind of doesn't matter though, because you can intervene regardless. Somebody says, could you talk more on how we might continue with this inquiry? Maybe do another whole talk just on this, please. Sure. So if I did another talk, then that'd be another time. Uh, so maybe that's what you're asking though. So yes, be happy to do that. Somebody says, how can we transform a fear pattern coming from childhood trauma? Well, uh, through awareness. That's the simple answer. Because if you're so the patterns play out automatically, which is fast, and that's unconscious. So, and most, I don't know about most, a lot of the patterns, yeah, most of the patterns that are playing out unconsciously are working well enough. Your heart beats, you're able to breathe, and cells are able to do their thing, and all kinds of stuff happening. And sun's doing its thing, all kinds of stuff happening. Those patterns are working well enough, and not a problem. So, um, but uh, so a point is that uh, the patterns that are working well enough, you don't there's not necessarily any obvious benefit to you right now in bringing more awareness to those things. Uh, I could be wrong about that, but I would say deal with the low-hanging fruit. I mean, the things that are causing the things that are the patterns that are resulting in distress and distraction are probably the ones to address. And so if you so just bring more awareness to them. So if anytime that you experience this fear pattern that you believe is coming from childhood trauma, whenever that's happening, then slow down and bring more awareness. So I would recommend you start with either active relaxation or breath awareness. Basically, apply the ask framework. So the first step is to notice, is there any actual threat right now? Any real, honest to goodness danger right now? And the answer to that is going to be no, at least 99.99999999999. plus percent of the time. Uh, and when once you've determined that, then just shift your attention to noticing uh, what's actually happening right now. So the uh, active relaxation or breath awareness can be very supportive of that. And and that will help you then to just notice what is the actual nature of whatever's occurring. So as I was talking about earlier, there are sensations occurring. Those sensations don't actually have a meaning. We assign a meaning to them out of habit, and that happens automatically and fast. But if you slow things down by, for example, using either breath awareness or active relaxation, then you start to allow the release of the association of the meaning with the sensations. And as you do that, then that might be all that's necessary. Or you have other methods that can also be supportive that you could also apply. I would always start with using either active relaxation or breath awareness, but then you could use, for example, the rapid resolution method in order to potentially accelerate the release of that pattern. All right. There's a popular thread there. It's amazing. Okay. How do I distinguish if I'm feeling my own emotions or other people's? Well, you're only ever uh, feeling what you're feeling, but you certainly could be uh, overly concerned about other people, which could lead to you anticipating or projecting on others, and then therefore feeling those things that you're anticipating or projecting on others. And uh, practically speaking, I would say it doesn't matter because either way, I would recommend just applying the ask framework. So again, the first step is there any actual, honest to goodness, obvious threat or danger right now? Not a thought about some potential thing that might happen, or there could be theoretically some invisible danger or something like that. But is there any obvious, real, honest to goodness danger that you can actually perceive and that you could actually do something about or to avoid? And the answer to that is going to be no. But you have to ask, just check in. And once you've determined the answer to that is no, then use either active relaxation or breath awareness uh, to help yourself to actually notice what's the reality of what you're actually experiencing rather than the thoughts about all of it. And if, I mean, if that doesn't give you complete results, then I can give you some other suggestions, but based on more detail about what you're experiencing at that point that seems to be an obstacle. So I recommend that you start by applying the ask framework. And then if you have specific obstacles that come up or challenges that come up, then let me know about those and I can give other suggestions. Okay, so somebody says, can you elaborate a bit more about how to deal with the fear of humiliation pattern from childhood? Okay, so um, well, I would say it's the same thing. So the so something so that fear comes up triggered by something happening presently. So there are associations made uh between so your nervous system is fearful of being humiliated based on experiences that you had or that you think you had as a child. And because that's high priority according to your nervous system, it's a high priority to avoid that. Then it has all kinds of triggers that is associated with that so that you can be reminded you can be alerted to that possible danger. And so anytime that you're experiencing that, anytime you're aware of that, it's because there's some trigger that is associated that's reminded you of that in that moment. And uh, so so you want to allow yourself to free yourself of that association so that it's not going to be triggered. That would be the one thing. And you can do that again just by using the ask framework. So to start out, is there any actual, real, honest to goodness, obvious danger or threat right now that you can really see and potentially do something to avoid? Like a real danger, not some hypothetical, imagined, potential thing that might happen, but something actual that's obvious and present. And if the answer to that is no, then apply either breath awareness or active relaxation. So that will allow you to be aware of what's actually happening directly and to start to release the uh, associations, the habits of reacting that reinforce that the association is valid, that whatever the trigger is a valid trigger that you need to continue to be worried about. And that would be the number one thing that I would recommend. If you do that, uh, that will that will that will deal with at least 80%. And after you do that, uh, if you find that there's still something unresolved, then you know of other methods that you could use, that you could explore. Find choose one that you feel comfortable with applying yourself, that you've gotten results from, and work with that. And if you're not sure at that point, or if still have questions, then let me know, and I can give you some specific recommendations based on what it is that you're noticing at that time. Somebody says, "How can this be my dream and your dream at the same time?" Uh, there's, there's, oh, so this is what I call mixing levels. So you say, when you say me, notice who are you referring to? So you're referring to an individual. You're referring to something discrete, something that's not the same as something else. So it's a distinct, discrete you. And so if you say, well, this is my dream, and it's also the dream of the other individuals that I'm perceiving, then that's not actually what I'm saying. That's mixing levels. What I'm saying is that there is one consciousness which is effectively dreaming this. So similar, when you lie down in bed and you close your eyes and then you begin to dream. In that dream, there's a whole world, there are many characters. So you could ask the same question, well, which of these characters is dreaming this dream? Well, the answer to that is none. None of the characters are dreaming the dream. The characters are characters in the dream. There's one consciousness in which the dream is occurring, and you could call that your consciousness from that point of view, but um, it's not quite right. But it's consciousness. So consciousness is dreaming. And within that dream, there's the appearance of many characters. You are never actually one of the characters. out of habit you identify as a character. But consciousness is dreaming. So the dream is consciousness. So uh hopefully that answers that. But if it doesn't, you can let me know. So got to vote for please, full inquiry, even guided, please, please, what questions to ask. So you're asking for more detail on this, more of an exploration, I guess. Um, so I hear that that's I'll take that into consideration for subsequent weeks. So somebody says, so when you allow the feeling, you said stop the inner process. So when you get bad thoughts and feelings in a situation, just allowing it is stopping the inner process, or does it involve more than allowing and not resisting? Could you give a basic example, please? Well, uh, so okay, so I mean, you could give me a uh an example, and I could describe to you what it is that I would suggest in regard to that. Uh, and if that doesn't work for you, I can give you a more generic example. But I think if you give me a specific example, that might be more useful for you. Somebody says, so I'm ready for the full inquiry. So do I just keep asking, who am I? I seem to be quite a fearful character that doesn't achieve. Uh, so um, so if you ask who am I and you get a response to that, then that's a thought, right? I mean, it's another thought. It's something that you can conceptualize. So the thing to know is that that's not it. That is not the answer to who am I. It's an answer that your mind has come up with, but it's not the answer. So that's one approach is you could keep asking, who am I? But then any conceptual answers, any thought that you come up with, you have to know that that's not it. So you can continue with that process, kind of exhausting all of the thoughts that you have, all of the attempts that you have to capture who you are in thought. You just have to continue to recognize that none of those are the answer. So that would be a valid way to do it. Um, Eventually, what would be? I laugh because the thing is, what you eventually come to is what's always perfectly obvious, which is, I mean, you're the one who's aware. You're the one in which to whom all of this is appearing and occurring. So uh, the so uh, that, but you might have. It's possible you need to go through that process of exhausting all of the various thoughts and attempts to get the right thought before you can actually allow yourself to recognize what's obvious. And another thing I'll say about that is I'm biased. I think a faster approach is to just allow. It's essentially the same thing, but it's slightly faster variant on this is just to allow whatever it is that comes up to come up, uh, and just remain with just noticing whatever comes up, and through that, not grasping at any of it, but just noticing that it's all just content that's surfacing. And through that, it might, like, for example, active relaxation would be a specific method that you could use that would possibly facilitate that. And then uh, you might start to notice that all of this content is occurring in, there's no word for this, but I say awareness, in the awareness, and that awareness is here as a constant. So all the thoughts are coming and going. The thoughts arise and then they seem to go wherever they go. So they're coming and going, coming and going, coming and going, coming and going. And our habit is to be fixated on those things, on all the content. Ooh, what's the next one? What about the next one? Maybe this next one's going to be the answer. Uh, and but eventually, as you just allow all of that, you might start to notice and be curious about the space in which all of this is occurring, and to notice that that is constant. Because that, I mean, that's another hint is whatever what you are is what's constant, unchanging. So if it's changing, that's not it. So somebody says, not a question, but following your teachings has given me incredible compassion for people. I'm not sure how people get through life effectively without having such knowledge or using of using leverage of changing their internal process. Yeah, good. Um, so somebody says, okay, I've found the mechanism inside that causes the pain. Now, how to have meaningful relationships. Is that a question or was that just an observation? If it's a question, uh, let me know. Somebody says, why are we having dreams in space and time? Is the construct in which this dream takes place, is it consciousness that is dreaming collectively, or is it only our specific characters which has subjective experiences? Uh, well, like I was mentioning earlier, uh, when you lie down in bed and you close your eyes and you dream, then there's a whole dream universe populated with dream characters, and you could uh, you out of habit you identify with a particular character, and then you could think, okay, if you were to partially awaken, you could you'd have like a little bit of presence, not fully awake or present, but a little bit. You could start to question, well, is this a dream? Am I dreaming? But you're still thinking that you're the character. So you're identified with the character in the dream, but you start to think, maybe this is a dream. Maybe I'm dreaming, but by you're thinking the character. And then you start to puzzle, well, gee, what about all of these other characters? If this is a dream, then are they also dreaming? And how does that work? You want to know. Um, but it's based on a misunderstanding because again, is that actually what's happening? Are there many characters who are dreaming within the dream? Or is the dream itself, which includes all of the characters, including the character that you identify with temporarily, is all of that a dream within consciousness? So if all of that is a dream within consciousness, then it hopefully shines some light on why the question is uh, based on some other assumptions. Somebody says, so do you no longer identify as Joey Lot? Who are you asking? Uh, Not in this moment. Not in this moment. You could ask me another time and I might give you a different answer. I mean, because you say no longer, no longer. It's a loaded question. I just, I like, I guess I don't buy into some of the presuppositions. So, because again, remember I said that the time and space are constructs within the dream. So the idea of no longer presupposes that there was someone who did identify previously and now doesn't and will never again. But that actually doesn't make sense to me. Like I get, I'm not suggesting that it doesn't make sense linguistically or that I can't understand where it's coming from, but I'm just saying that that doesn't make sense based on my perception of things, which I've attempted to share. So let's say, so this person says, let's say I don't like a specific place. I used to resist the feeling and therefore reinforce the same pattern, but now I don't judge. I just allow the feeling I get. This is my example. Yeah. So if you're, so there's a place, there's a place, a specific place that you decided that you didn't like. And so uh, there are you know the place is neutral. There's nothing uh, there's nothing good or bad about the place. It's neutral. And uh, by the way, before I let me back up and say not liking a place is totally valid. Like you get to do that. You that's a choice, and I'm not proposing that people should not have preferences. Absolutely get to have preferences, not a problem. Uh, it's like if there's a place you don't like and you have no reason to go there, uh, there's no reason for you to think about it at all. It's not that does not need to be a problem at all. Uh, if you if there's a specific place you don't like and that place is a place that it's like wherever you are is the specific place that you don't like, then probably that would be something to investigate and probably free yourself of the unhelpful conditioning that's causing you the unnecessary suffering and stress. So under those conditions, then you could notice that the place is neutral. It's neither good nor bad. It's just a place. And that you have but you have an associated feeling. And that there's an internal process which generates that feeling. So, and all of that you just notice. So you don't need to do anything about it. You don't need to try to change anything, but just be aware of it. And then notice any habits of trying to resist or cling to any of it. And just be willing to release or let go of those habits of resistance or clinging so that you can just allow yourself to continue to notice the neutrality of all of it. There's just, there's sensation that's occurring. The sensation consists of these, it's just sensation, some located somewhere, has particular qualities. It doesn't have any meaning. There are thoughts, mental images. Uh, those are neutral as well. They're just what they are. They don't have any meaning. And as you just continue to allow all of that, then you're allowing for that conditioning to be released. And then the it becomes directly clear to you the reality of the fact that it's neutral because you're releasing those associations. Uh, if I not answer your question, you can let me know. Somebody says, "What is here before next thought could be awareness who I am." Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yes. So, if that's a useful cue for you to be to be aware of what's before the next thought, then I think that's excellent. Um, Somebody says, "In my father's house are many mansions, and sell all you have and follow me." Is that the same as you're saying in the words of a different dreamer? Uh, I'm, cat just dug her claws into me. Um, the, I'm, I don't know. I'm hesitant to, to claim that I know what was intended by those statements. Uh, and I don't, personally, I don't think it's necessary because I think that, uh, I mean, let's say if a person, like if a person identifies as Christian, and that's important, they're a follower of Christ and they have accepted Jesus as uh, their their teacher and their God, and it's important to them to be true to that, to be true to the teachings of Christ. Then obviously that uh, would be by then definition important to them to reconcile anything that they take on with the teachings of Jesus. And I am I don't feel the need personally to do that. So I don't. Um and I like I said, I'm hesitant to attempt to do it because I don't I don't identify as Christian. Uh, I don't, uh, and I don't feel that I need to reconcile anything with the teachings of Jesus. I don't, uh, dismiss the teachings. Uh, I have appreciation for them. I, but I'm just not, because I don't identify as Christian, I have not steeped myself in those teachings. I think that uh and I think I think it does a disservice to everything and everyone involved to try to uh combine or reconcile things. Because like if if the teachings of Jesus are sufficient, if they are complete of themselves, then there's no need to bring anything else into the mix. I think that uh, I think if a person really accepts fully the teachings of Jesus and accepts Jesus as their teacher and as their Lord, then um, they would be doing themselves a disservice to look outside of that, because that would be to look outside of that is to say it's not complete, it's not sufficient. And so it would undermine their faith. It would undermine their relationship with Jesus. It would undermine their relationship with teachings, and it would uh, make that less effective for them as a path. With that said, I'm not suggesting that it's wrong or bad to take inspiration or derive value from those teachings or feel a connection to those teachings or to Jesus. Uh, and also find have another path as your main path. I'm just saying that if a person has a path and they then it's I think it's important that they stay on that path because if you imagine, if you think of as an analogy, think about a mountain. There's flaws to any analogy, so don't take it too literally. But if you imagine a mountain, and if the goal, this is where it's kind of I'm not fully committed to this analogy, but I don't have a better one at the moment. But if the goal is to arrive at the top of the mountain, there are many different paths, and each path has its pros and cons. I mean, they're unique paths. So you could find good things to say and bad things to say about each path. I mean, there might be a path and it's like, that's the scenic path. Holy cow, that one's got all the scenery, but it also happens to be really steep. And then you got a path that it's like the it's like the easiest of the paths, but it's so dull and it's a long path. And then you maybe have another path. It's the most direct path, but it has the most dangers. And so each path, like I say, I'm just making stuff up, but paths each have their own characteristics. So if you start out on one path and then you're like you're on the long, boring path, um, you're on the path for a while and you're like, oh my goodness, this is like so long and boring. I just would like to have some, faster paced excitement. So you could go over to a path that has the faster paced excitement for a little while, but then you say, oh my goodness, it's like so fast paced and so exciting. I really just like I can't sustain this pace. Uh, so then you go to a different path. You can keep doing that, but the problem is every time you start out on a path, you got to start from the beginning. So every time you switch, you're starting over again. And if the goal is to get to the top of the mountain, then you can see where the problem lies. And this is why I'm suggesting if you have a path, stay true to the path. Don't 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 go off that path because if you do, you're just shortchanging yourself. If you haven't if you haven't committed to a path, you might want to consider that. But also this comes back to, what do you really want? Uh, so so that's an important thing to get clear on is what do you really want? Um, Somebody says, really hard to put this together. So when I say it's my dream when sleeping, however, technically it's not mine. Yeah, right. So there's no my piece of awareness. It's just awareness, but I swear I'm right here. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the in the Vedic tradition, which is its own path. Um, there are in the scriptures there are these uh statements which are called Mahavakyas, and these are understood as the pinnacle of each of these scriptures, so that if you were to summarize the scripture, you could summarize it with these expressions, and um and they're translated as things like uh, that uh, I am that, uh, and so forth. So the essence of it is that the individual consciousness and the universal consciousness are one. So consciousness is uh, like the essence is the same. Consciousness is consciousness. It can take on a particular kind of flavor or color or shape temporarily. It can be shaped by the sense of because it's like uh if you have If you have air, you have air, and then you can uh, have a bottle and you put a stopper in the bottle. The air in the bottle and the air outside of the bottle, it's air, same air. The bottle is is gives a shape to the air inside of the bottle, but it's the same air. So in that sense, in a kind of parallel way, there's this sense of I, and the sense of I gives us kind of shape to or a sense of individuality. But actually, it's one consciousness. There's only consciousness. There are not two consciousnesses. So all consciousness is one consciousness, even if it takes on temporarily a particular shape. It's only one consciousness. And it's never not that consciousness. It never is defined by a shape. The shape is illusory. So technically, yes, when you dream while sleeping, it's technically not even if you notice your subjective experience, it's not even actually true. There's no other convenient way to describe this other than to say the dream while sleeping. But technically, if you notice your actual experience, there is no experience of dream while sleeping. The actual experience is just dream, technically not even dream. It's just the subjective experience that upon waking we will then call a dream, and we tell the story that this character, was asleep and dreaming. But the actual experience is not that. The actual experience is really not different from fundamentally from what's happening right now during the dream. During the dream, there's not a sense of I am sleeping. During the dream, the sense is I am I am this character and these things are happening to me in this world that is outside of me. It's only upon waking then you tell the story. So, but then notice when you have awoken and you say, "Oh, I was dreaming." The same thing is happening now. You're saying, I am I you don't say I'm dreaming. You say I'm awake. This is reality. The same as in the dream. In the dream, you don't say I'm sleeping or dreaming. You say I'm awake. This is reality. So uh so there's actually only consciousness, which is in which these different states are arising. Somebody says, so does the constant me have a voice? I would love to remove all fear. I have been doing ask, lost my job recently, and homeless, toothless is a predominant fear. Then through ask, I've recognized I'm always in fear, so would love to awaken from the character's fear that is low level, always there. So the first question is, so does the constant me have a voice? No. I mean, like there's not a voice that is the true voice of that because no, uh it's undivided. So there's in that sense, no, there's no voice. Uh there is with that said, there are uh more or less pure expressions of that which can be expressed through voice or thoughts. So it's not that all, so I, so not all, so in some sense we could say all thoughts or thoughts are equal in that they're all equally content within the dream. So no thought is ever the transcendent reality because it's always content within the dream. However, that doesn't mean that all thoughts within the dream have equal status within the dream because some thoughts are like the thought, uh, I am, let's say I have a thought, I am this person and I have no options and everything is always awful and will be awful forever and ever and ever. That's a very limited, very contracted, very fear-based thought. Contrast that with the thought, I am consciousness. I am the one in which this is occurring. That is much more open, much freer, and therefore more truthful thought. It's not the truth, but it's pointing more in the direction versus a thought that's much more contracted and fearful. So so not all thoughts are equal in that way. Um, but no thought and no voice uh is the truth. Like, yeah, because the truth with a capital T, the constant reality is silent. So, um, yeah, and I mean, just to be clear, when you're operating at that level to get clarity about who you are, it does not that does not that does not necessarily translate into how do we say this? It doesn't predictably translate in any particular way within the dream. So, back to the example that I gave earlier about the tornado. So if there's a dream about a tornado and you realize that you are the dreamer and that the tornado is irrelevant, it cannot harm you because you're not a character within the dream. That does not necessarily mean that the tornado will vanish and that there will be a rainbow and a pot of gold that will appear at the end of the rainbow and that your character will then be forever happy and wealthy and loved and adored. It doesn't mean that at all. It could equally go in a totally different direction, right? I mean, it could equally go, this tornado just tears through and destroys everything and kills the character, and that could be another possibility. So, uh, however, when you when you the more you recognize that truth, the 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 that means that in that moment when you're recognizing that you are not in that moment identified with the fear. So the subjective experience that you might call fear, that intensity, whatever the sensations, that subjective experience might still be there, but you're not identified as it. You're not, and you don't, uh, therefore, you're not indulging in the story about it, which, although it does, as I said, it doesn't guarantee any particular outcome within the dream. What it does do within the context of the dream is it does allow for more options. So instead of being automatically contracted, fearful, rigid, reactive, unconscious, there's more spaciousness, more opportunity to consider more options to the degree that that's of interest to you. So hopefully that's useful. So we're at 11 past the hour. I'm going to do, there says five more. I'm going to do those five, or I'm going to read through those five and then wrap up. So it says, I have things to do, but have fear of missing out on awesome insight in this call. Okay, cool. I noticed so much more energy or leverage available since start of this call being with all of you. Yes, good. Is there an ultimate dreamer or is consciousness just, well, I can't even begin to conceptualize what it might be, isness? Yeah, I mean yeah, like I said earlier, the uh punchline, as it were, is that consciousness is consciousness. So the sense of being individuated consciousness is still only consciousness, universal consciousness. So there's only that. So these you call it ultimate dreamer. The ultimate dreamer is consciousness, which is the same consciousness which you are. You've never been anything other than that. Uh, and even as there's a sense of being individuated, that that consciousness has never been modified. It's never been in any way changed. Somebody says, you mentioned that the easiest or faster approach to self-discovery is allow whatever it is to come. Is this because there's a specific path we are on that we are derailing from from by opposing resistance to what is? Well, I mean, you, I should qualify things. I probably will continue to forget to qualify things, but I mean, I should qualify and say, in my opinion, from where I am perceiving from in this moment, I would that was a true statement, and I probably would still perceive it that way. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a universal truth. I mean, maybe there's faster, easier approaches than what I've proposed. But from my perspective in this moment, that's the fastest, easiest way that I'm aware of. Um, so, uh, so I guess what I'm proposing is a path that I perceive as the fastest, easiest uh, path to know yourself. And are you saying, is it because there's a specific path we are on that we are derailing from by opposing resistance? So, I mean, if your goal is to, uh, if your goal is to know yourself as that, if that's what you want, if you if from my perspective, I think this is what I was saying earlier, uh, in many different ways. But from my perspective, the kind of back to the Ecclesiastes example that I gave, it's like Solomon had achieved all these things. He's like, I had all the wealth, all the power, all the wisdom, all of the pleasure. I had all of it. There was no more that could be had. I had the ultimate of all of it. And still, uh, that didn't do it. Still that wasn't what it wasn't really ultimately what I was looking for. Couldn't really quench this deep thirst. And so if the ultimate goal, if your ultimate goal, if you're if what you want is to know yourself, then I can't I can't conceive of presently any faster way than to actually just allow yourself to notice and be with the as much as possible what is actually unchanging, what is here constantly. And uh, so if you're resisting, then you're caught up in the content rather than just noticing. And in that way, I would say it's a distraction. So somebody says, is this an accurate summary? We're just source imagining ourselves as different characters. We experience all different states, emotions, thoughts. They constantly change. These are not us, but are just experiences with sensations that we assign meanings to. We label them. We tend to stick to them for perceived survival purposes. By practicing direct experience, experiencing sensations without the labels, we get in touch with the fact we're unchanging space, the constant unbiased presence, the container of it all. This will allow us to make decisions based on the truth of what we are instead of out of survival/fear. Yeah, it's a pretty good summary. I reserve the right to change my mind on that, but for now, it's an awesome summary. Um, okay. Somebody says they're going to need a long, deep nap after this. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. So okay. So there's two more that I'm going to respond to here. This person says, does the constant me have a, oh no, that way I already responded to that one. So this one says, when we try to notice what is always here, is that noticing something is always aware, or is that just the mind? Uh, so if there's a requirement of something to be aware of, in other words, an object, then that's not quite it. So, and this is where for most of us it gets pretty tricky, um, because we're so accustomed to perceiving that we're only here when there's an object for us to be aware of. That object could be anything. I mean, it's like, for example, a thought, an image, whatever it is. So most of the time, we only perceive that we're here when there's an object, and then we say, I'm aware, because I'm aware of an object. And uh, objects are coming and going. Objects are not constant. Objects have beginnings, middles, and ends. So beyond that, before that, prior to that, however you understand that, uh, there's what I'm calling awareness, and that that and which but that does not depend upon the appearance of an object. So even when there's not an object, this awareness, what I'm calling awareness, still is here. And this is where, as I say, for many people, this becomes where it kind of starts to fall off the rails. But you don't have to get it today. You can just start to be curious about that. Just start to notice and just find out. Because remember what I said near the beginning, which is that any thought, any conceptualization, any understanding is not it, because all any of that is still has a boundary to it. So it's still like you're capturing something, and therefore whatever can be captured, whatever can be grasped, that's not it. So you just keep exploring. Um, and that is all for now. So I'm going to wrap up. So blessings to you all. Take care. Bye for now.